Hello, my dear friends. I'm Mr. Sean Rabbit, and I'll tell you terrible stories. The Texas Plains, a place where the sun scorches the earth and the nights plunge everything into sticky darkness. Here, on the very edge of the map, lies a ghost town called Blackhollow. It's not in the newspapers, it's not on modern maps, but anyone who's ever driven along old Highway 46 has heard the legends about it. Blackhollow was deserted in 1985 after a string of strange disappearances. 7 people disappeared, but no bodies were ever found. No one knew what happened to them. The newspapers talked about cults, mysticism, the local madman Jed Henderson who lived on the outskirts. Eventually, people just moved away, leaving their homes to rot in the blazing sun. 30 years later, journalist Frank Wilson came to Blackhollow. He was gathering material for an article on ghost towns. A cheap motel 40 miles out of town, an old Ford, a camera, a flashlight, and a Colt revolver bought just in case. Frank drove into town just before sunset. The wind raced dusty curtains through the streets. The broken windows of the houses resembled empty eye sockets. The silence was absolute. Not a single cricket sang, not a single crow cawed. It was as if the city had been waiting for him. He parked in front of an old bar with a sign that read, "Quiet Coyote." It was empty inside, but there was a glass of whiskey on the counter, fresh on the rocks, like someone had just set it down and stepped out for a minute. Frank took out his camera and snapped a few shots. Just then there was a rustle from the back room. The journalist turned sharply. No one. Only the door was slowly swinging back and forth. "Who's there?" he asked. Only the whisper of the wind answered. But when he turned around, the glass was gone. Feeling the cold sweat running down his back, he walked out of the bar. Dusk was already falling outside. The lantern illuminated the dilapidated walls of the buildings and the shabby signs. In the distance, he heard a strange sound, like someone shuffling on the ground in bare feet. Frank headed toward the old La Luna Hotel, where rumor had it that victims of disappearances had once lived. The stairs to the second floor creaked as he ascended. The doors to the rooms were ajar, yellowed newspapers lying around. One of them bore the headline, "Blackhollow Victims Gone Missing." It was then that he heard a quiet, intermittent sigh behind him. Frank turned sharply around. A figure stood at the end of the hallway, a tall man in faded overalls and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was hidden in shadow, but Frank felt his gaze. "Welcome home," the stranger muttered. Frank drew his revolver and took a step back, but suddenly realized that the walls of the hotel had changed. There were stains on the yellowed wallpaper, dark, sticky, smelling of iron. The air was thick with pain and fear. "You knew you'd find something creepy in here, didn't you?" The man continued, stepping forward. "You came to us on your own. Now Blackhollow is alive again." Frank rushed toward the stairs, but the town was no longer the same. The streets were filled with people, pale, eyeless, their mouths open in silent screams. They surrounded him, stretching out their arms, their fingers long and thin like old men's. He squeezed his eyes shut and fired. The shot echoed through the night, and when he opened his eyes, everything was gone. He was standing in the middle of a deserted street, gun in hand. Only now there were no keys in his Ford. His cell phone had no signal. In the distance, he heard barefoot footsteps again, and he knew the city wouldn't let him go. Blackhollow was alive again.